That Christmas night is burned into my memory like a scar that never faded. The house was glowing from the outside, warm yellow lights outlining the roof, laughter spilling through the walls like music meant for everyone but me. I stood on the porch holding my daughter's small hand, her fingers cold inside my glove. She was only 7, dressed in a coat I'd bought secondhand, her hair tied carefully the way she liked. She was excited. She thought Christmas meant family. I should have known better. The door opened, and my brother stood there, tall, confident, already half smiling at something behind me. That smile vanished when he saw my face. "Oh," he said flatly. "You actually came." I forced a polite smile. "Merry Christmas." He stepped aside just enough to let us in, but his body language screamed resistance. The warmth inside hit my face, along with the smell of roasted meat and cinnamon. My daughter's eyes widened. "Mom, it's so pretty," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "Yes, it is. We hadn't been invited directly. My mother had mentioned dinner casually on the phone, like an afterthought. I knew what that meant, but part of me still hoped things had changed. Hope can be cruel like that. Everyone was already seated when we entered the dining room. My sister-in-law barely looked up. My cousins exchanged glances. My father nodded stiffly. My mother smiled too hard, the kind of smile that hides guilt. We took the last 2 empty chairs. Dinner started awkwardly. Conversations flowed around us, never to us. My daughter sat quietly, waiting for someone to talk to her. She tried once. "Uncle," she said softly, "I made you a card." My brother didn't even look at her. He took a sip of wine instead. Something cracked inside me. Halfway through the meal, my brother finally spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't think this table is appropriate for everyone," he said, setting his fork down deliberately. "This is family dinner." The room went silent. I felt my daughter tense beside me. "What do you mean?" I asked calmly, though my heart was pounding. He leaned back in his chair. "I mean, you made your choices. You left. You came back with a child and no stability. This isn't fair to the rest of us." My mother gasped. "Don't." He raised a hand to stop her. "No. It needs to be said. This isn't the place for guests." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "Are you saying my daughter doesn't belong here?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "I'm saying this isn't the environment for her." My daughter looked up at me, confused. "Mom." I stood up slowly, every eye in the room watching. "We'll leave," I said. "Thank you for making it clear." My brother nodded, relieved. "That's probably best." No one stopped us. Not my mother. Not my father. No one. Outside, the cold air felt brutal. My daughter's lips were trembling. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. I knelt in front of her, holding her face gently. "No, baby. Never you." That night, after she fell asleep in our small apartment, I sat alone in the dark. And I made a promise. I would never forget that night. I would never forget the way they looked at us. And one day, without shouting, without begging, without revenge that looked like anger, they would regret it. Not because I needed their approval, but because success has a way of making people remember who they tried to erase. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I sat at the small kitchen table, bills spread out in front of me, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. My daughter slept in the next room, curled up with the stuffed bear she'd had since she was 3. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face at that table, confused, embarrassed, trying to understand why love had conditions. That was the night something in me changed. I stopped hoping they would accept us. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped seeing myself as the one who had to explain. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made breakfast, packed my daughter's school bag, and kissed her forehead like I always did. But inside, a quiet determination had settled in. Heavy, solid, unmovable. Life didn't magically get easier after that Christmas. If anything, it got harder. I worked 2 jobs. One during the day at a small accounting firm, another at night doing freelance financial cleanup for struggling small businesses. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about hustle. I didn't complain. I learned. I listened. I saved. I became invisible on purpose. My family didn't call much. When they did, it was short, polite, empty. "How are you?" "Fine." "That's good." No one asked about my daughter anymore. Years passed like that. My brother, meanwhile, flourished, at least on the surface. He talked big, posted photos of vacations, dinners, expensive bottles of wine. He loved telling people how successful he was, how he'd built something real. My mother repeated his stories like gospel. "He's doing so well," she'd say. "You should be proud of him." I was proud, just not in the way she thought. Because quietly, behind the scenes, I was watching everything. The firm where I worked during the day grew rapidly. The owner trusted me. Eventually, he offered me a partnership, silent, partial, no announcement. I said yes. At night, my freelance work turned into consulting, then into equity deals, then into something much bigger. By the time my daughter turned 12, I had stopped counting hours. I measured time in milestones instead. First six-figure year, first acquisition, first time I paid off every debt I had ever carried. And still, I said nothing. I drove the same modest car. I lived in the same small apartment longer than I needed to. I wore simple clothes. I learned something powerful. When people think you're struggling, they show you exactly who they are. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Your brother is hosting Christmas this year," she said carefully. "He says, you're welcome to come. If you want." I almost laughed. "Why now?" I asked. She hesitated. "He's doing very well. He bought a new house. Big one. He wants the family together." I looked around my office, glass walls, city view, my name on a discreet plaque beside three others. My daughter was at school, safe, confident, happy. A world away from that cold night years ago. "Yes," I said. "We'll come." There was relief in her voice. "That's good. That's very good." When Christmas came, we arrived right on time. The house was massive, tastefully decorated, loud, familiar in all the same uncomfortable ways. My brother greeted us like nothing had ever happened. Smiling, charming, loud. "Hey," he said. "You made it." "Yes," I replied. "We did." Dinner was elaborate, expensive. Everyone talked about money, investments, growth. My brother dominated the conversation. "I took a big risk last year," he said proudly. "Paid off huge. Not everyone can do what I do." My daughter sat beside me, calm, confident, no longer the small girl with trembling hands. She caught my eye and smiled. At one point, my brother turned to her. "So," he said lightly, "what do you want to be when you grow up?" She answered without hesitation. "Whatever I choose." There was an awkward pause. He chuckled. "Ambitious." I stayed quiet. Dessert came out. Wine was poured. My brother stood up, tapping his glass. "I just want to say," he announced, "I'm grateful for family. Even when things are complicated." His eyes flicked toward me. I raised my glass politely. Later that night, as people began to leave, my brother pulled me aside. "You seem different," he said. "Better, I mean. You doing okay financially?" I met his gaze, steady and calm. "Yes," I said. "Very." He laughed. "Good. You know, if you ever need help." "I won't," I said gently. Something about my tone unsettled him. Because for the first time, he felt it. The shift. And he had no idea how close he was to understanding what that Christmas night had truly set in motion. The house looked different when we left that night. Not because anything had changed in the walls or the lights or the decorations, but because I had. As we drove home, my daughter leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. She was quiet for a long time. "Mom," she finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did they talk to us differently now?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Because people often respect what they think they can't control." She nodded slowly, absorbing it in her own way. "I don't like that." "I know," I said. "Neither do I." That night, after she went to bed, I sat in my living room and thought about the past, not with anger, but with clarity. I realized something important. I didn't need revenge that involved shouting or humiliation. Life had already positioned me somewhere powerful. What came next wasn't about hurting my brother. It was about ending the story on my terms. A few weeks later, I got an email. It was from a law firm. My brother's company was in trouble. Serious trouble. One of his largest investors had quietly pulled out. Another had frozen funding. A third had demanded a full audit. The firm handling the audit. One of the companies I partially owned, a detail that had never crossed his radar. I hadn't planned it that way. But I didn't stop it either. I read through the reports carefully. Numbers don't lie. And my brother's success, the one he had bragged about for years, was built on shortcuts, inflated projections, and risky assumptions. Nothing illegal. Just fragile. Very fragile. A week later, my phone rang. It was him. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "Hey," he said, voice tight. I didn't know who else to call. I waited. "There's a situation," he continued. "My investors are panicking. They want answers. I heard you consult now. Financial stuff." "I do," I said calmly. "I was wondering if maybe you could take a look." "Off the record." "Family. Family." The word hung in the air. I remembered my daughter's small hands wrapped around her fork at that Christmas table years ago. I remembered the heat in my face. The silence that followed his words. I can take a look, I said. Professionally. There was a pause. What does that mean? It means contracts, I replied. Clear boundaries. No favors. He swallowed. I could hear it. Okay. We met in my office a few days later. He walked in confident, then stopped short. Glass walls. City view. Assistants moving efficiently. My name on the door. He stared at it like it was written in another language. This is yours, he asked. Partially, I said. Enough. He sat down slowly. For the first time in his life, he didn't speak first. I walked him through the numbers. Calmly, clearly, without judgment. By the end, his face was pale. So, what happens? He asked. That depends, I said. You can restructure. You can sell. Or you can lose control. And you? His voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want? I looked at him for a long moment. I want you to understand something, I said. This has nothing to do with that night. Not anymore. He frowned. Then why does it feel like it does? Because, I said gently, that was the moment you stopped seeing me as family. And this is the moment you realize I never stopped being capable. He didn't argue. He couldn't. In the end, he chose to sell. Quietly, quickly, at a loss. The story online was framed as a strategic pivot. People moved on. They always do. At the next Christmas, my mother invited us to her house. This time, she said, I want everyone together. I agreed. The table was smaller. The food simpler. The tone different. My brother didn't dominate the conversation. He listened more, watched my daughter with something close to respect, maybe even regret. At one point, he cleared his throat. I owe you both an apology, he said. For things I said. For things I didn't. The room was quiet. I nodded. Thank you. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was enough. Later that night, my daughter helped me wash the dishes. Mom, she said, smiling softly, I like this ending better. So do I replied. Because revenge doesn't always come with fireworks or raised voices. Sometimes, it comes years later, calm, steady, undeniable. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say after being told you don't belong is nothing at all.